Hi, my name is Daniel, and I've been experimenting with Jasper Art, a part of Jasper AI, for the past 24 hours, give or take. It's mind-blowing, to say the least. I've been into photography for quite some time, and I've always been interested in portrait photography. So one of the few things that I wanted to try out was to see if we could do something in terms of photography to generate people with AI. And I did some tests and I posted it to the Jasper community on Facebook, and people were quite intrigued and wanted to know more. So I've decided to record a video showcasing how I actually came up with the images that you see in the background, or at least one or two of them. One of the prerequisites for doing this is, of course, to have a subscription for Jasper Arts, which is currently in beta. And you also need a subscription to Adobe Photoshop. And you will need to install the beta version of the newest version of Photoshop, because we're going to use a neural filter, which is only available in their beta. And it's very, very, very easy to install it. This is how we do it. From within the Creative Cloud desktop application that you have on either Mac or Windows, you will see all your installed applications from Creative Cloud. On the left side in the menu, you have something called Beta Apps. If you click on this, you will see, I've already installed it, but you will have the option to install Photoshop in the beta version. So what you do is you find it, it's usually on top, and you just click install. You wait for a couple of minutes for Photoshop beta version to install, and that's all you need in terms of Photoshop to be able to create the images we're about to create right now. The next thing we do is to head into Jasper, and specifically Jasper Art, where I've pulled up one of the images that I created before. So let's recreate that one with a bit of a twist. You can see in the image description that I've used the prompt of a young woman, happy blonde Vogue, wavy hair, highly detailed, matching dark blue eyes, with insane detail, depth of field, photorealistic and bokeh. This is something that I enjoy as a photographer as well. I've tried a lot of tests adding style of Annie Leibovitz and Vivian Meyer, who are two photographers I really enjoy. Having a lot of images showing up like this is crucial. You really need to look at images where preferably the eyes are looking somewhat okay. I've seen a lot of images where you have one eye pointing to the right and one eye pointing to the left, which is really, really hard to work with in post-production or in Photoshop. So what I'm looking for is images where you have the eyes more or less pointing in the same direction, because that will make it way easier and way quicker when we get the image ready to work with it within Photoshop. So in this scenario, I've opted to work with the image that we see in the top left. And this is basically what I'm doing is I take this one, I click it, I save it to my computer, and then I open it in Photoshop and making sure that it's opened up in Photoshop Beta. So when we're finally inside of Photoshop, I've just opened the picture. You can see it's pretty small, and if we're zooming in as well, you can see that it's got some, well, pretty bad details, to say the least. In order to scale this up properly, what we need to do is that we go into Edit. On Mac, this is directly under Preferences, I think. And you go down to Preferences, and in the bottom you have something called Technology Previews. Within the Technology Previews window, you need to make sure that you have Enable Preserve Details 2.0 Upscale enabled. It's usually enabled, but just make sure it is. When you do have the picture, what we do is we go to Image and we go to Image Size. The easiest way is to, what I usually do is I change the resolution from 72 pixels. We change this to pixels first, sorry. So always work in pixels. So I change this from 72 pixels per inch to 300 pixels per inch. And I make sure that the resample is set to preserve details 2.0. And then I click OK. What we get is an image that in size is far bigger than the original. The original image is approximately, I think it's 512 times 512 pixels, and this is 2100 pixels times 2100 pixels, give or take. So the picture itself is way bigger, which gives us way more detail to work with. When this is done, what I do is that you go up into filters. What I usually do is I double click this and press enter just so I can actually work on it. And then I go to filters, I go to neural filters. And down here in beta, you will see photo restoration. And since this is the first time I'm using this on this computer, and the same will be for you, you can see that the download size is pretty hefty, or it's about 900 megabytes. So what you need to do is you click on download, you wait for it to download. And when you do have the photo restoration neural filter downloaded, this is where the magic happens. We enable it, and quite instantly you can see the effect. This is the after, and this is the before. This is just the neural filter in Photoshop. It's amazing. It takes care of all these wonky eyes. What I usually do is that I crank up the photo enhancement. I've tended to go quite high on this one. I'm not really afraid to go up to like 75, 80, give or take. It's all depending on the look you want, but you can see the difference. The difference is it's night and day. So just by doing this and going okay, the difference is mind-blowing. Let's just cancel this. We go to filter, we go to neural filters again. Photo restoration, we enable this. We go to 75 and I'm selecting a new layer instead. So it's way easier to see the before and after. This is just outstanding. The next thing I do usually is that I go to camera raw filter. And when this is open, this is usually where I go to make the color corrections, and I usually add a bit more contrast to it. The way that I've usually done it is I go to detail, I crank up the sharpening to about 5. Don't usually go more than 5. When it comes to the curve, I'm just adding a bit more contrast to it, just a tiny bit. And then in color grading, in the midtones, I usually tend to add a bit more orange, and in the shadows I add a bit more bluish. So before and after. Again, subtle changes, but it makes a huge difference. On occasion, I've also done a levels adjustment. I've cranked up the light just a bit, and you can also make the darks a bit lighter depending on how it looks. But again, before and after. For me, this looks pretty good. And then what I usually do is I go to the dodge tool. I set it to midtones, to exposure 50%. And what I do is that I just you need to select the layer, not the layer mask. So on the layer, and I just paint in the eyes just a tiny bit, just to give them a bit more highlight. Again, before and after. Huge difference. This is more or less the image that I uploaded before. But as you can see, there's this almost like a plastic skin to it, and there is a quite easy way to make or to give the subject a bit more detail in the skin, and this is how it's done. Let's take these two just for the sake of convenience. So what we do in order to get a bit more texture on the skin is that we create a new layer. We then go into Edit, we go to Fill, and we select the contents to be 50% gray. I then right click on this one and create it into a smart object. Then go into Filter and Filter Gallery. The resolution that we get from Jasper is usually pretty, or it is pretty low resolution even when we scale it up. So I tend to go pretty low on the scaling as well. But as you can see, that the bigger you go in scaling, the more or the clunkier the detail will be. So let's go with 60, maybe 4, give or take, to see if this works. When we have this in place, we change the blending mode from normal to both overlay and soft light will work. I usually tend to go with soft light because it's a bit more subtle. Can change it to overlay if it's way too subtle. But if we zoom in now, we can see that she's actually got a bit more detail in her face. Yeah. So I'm selecting the layer, I'm clicking Alt and clicking on this icon down here, which basically means that we're hiding everything behind a mask. So this is with everything showing, and this is where we hide everything. And everything that's black is hidden. So what we do is that we make sure that we select the brush, we have a white foreground color, and then what I do is that I change the opacity to around 40% and the flow to around 40%. And what we then can do is that we can paint. If we have the layer mask selected, what we do, let's just zoom out a bit. What we do is that we paint in on the black layer mask, we paint in white where we want the texture from the texturizer that we have in the background. This is something that takes a bit of time because you want to paint it slowly over where you want the texture to be shown. So take your time if you want this to be as realistic as possible, because if you do have the opacity and flow set too high, it'll show. So this will make it way more subtle and more, in my eyes, realistic. If it's too little, you can always try to crank up not necessarily the opacity, but to try increasing the flow to 50 or 55%. But you can see that we do have a bit more texture on the skin right now. And this is just a quick and easy, convenient way to get rid of this plastic skin that we usually get from Jasper. So this is the after and this is the before. Subtle changes, but makes a huge difference. And the only thing that I usually do after this is on the layer itself. I go to filter, I go to sharpen, I go to smart sharpen, and I pretty much leave it as it is. And I just go OK. So this is the before picture. This is what we got from Jasper. And this is the final picture that, in my opinion, getting from an AI just based out of a prompt and a bit of magic in Photoshop, it's pretty amazing. Thank you for watching. I will continue to try and test a lot more things because I really love images and photography, and being able to do things like this with an AI is it's intriguing, it's fun, it's interesting, it's something that I'm probably gonna spend way more time with. So looking forward to it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like so I know that you enjoyed it, and that means that I might even consider creating more images or more videos, because I very rarely do it. But this is something that I find really fun. Thank you.